through. For the Lord wait on his promise, understand God has not forgotten you. When times get tough, you got to look up to heaven and encourage yourself and say, shall bear they just like an eagle and soar. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and never faint. They that wait on the Lord, and I say, what? Hold on a little while longer. Here's what you gotta do. Just believe. He'll work it out for you. One thing you must remember, my God is able and he cares for you. Come on, it's a. Let's say it like this. Wait on the Lord and he will come through. Wait on the Lord and he will answer you. Wait on the Lord. Wait on the Lord. Work for faith that wait. What? Shall bear they just like an eagle and soar. They shall run and not be weary. Never faint. Faith that wait on the Lord. And I say, what? Now go tell somebody you're close to. Here's. Just tell them this. He'll work it out for you. One thing you must remember, my God is able and he cares. Cares for you, yeah. Wait on the Lord. Wait on the Lord. They will answer you. Wait on and it won't be long. Wait on.
I'll be waiting you. Say that wait and don't think. Show me new strength. They should mount upon wings.
Like eagles that soar. Tell them how you feel. I'm so glad. I've learned how to wait. In the midst of my waiting, I get a blessing every day. They shall mount upon wings like an eagle that soars. They shall walk. Take it away and wait. Wait. Waiting on the Lord and he will come through. Wait on the Lord. Wait on the Lord. And it won't be long. Wait, I say it's gonna work for those now. Let me see you break it down with me. What? Let me see you break it down with me. Wave your hands and shake your head. Stomp your feet and tell your neighbor, hold on. Hey, yeah. Hold on. I'm telling you. Hold on. Just a little while. Greetings. I'm your king.
Greetings. I'm King Clifford Jefferson, ascendant of Godfrey, the fifth kind of man, Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem. I'm the reincarnation of King Edgar the Peaceful, which we know as the Vicar of Christ or Jesus Christ or Melchizedek, King of Righteousness. It is December 10th, 2025, which would be equivalent to the Berber year 2975. I greet you in the name of King Edgar the Peaceful. I greet you in the name of my queen, Sister Galveston from the House of Galveston. I greet you in the name of all the predecessors, all the heirs, all the successors, all those who are striving to get an understanding of what it is that we are here and called to do. In light of the past 4 or 5 lectures that I did, which were complement each other, this one is called The Berbers of English, French, and Spanish Ancestry here in the English Empire of North America. Okay? The Berbers of English, French, and Spanish ancestry in the English Empire of America. If you watch the last 4 or 5 lectures, you will be able to make that connection. Nonetheless, I will try to do my best to fill in the gaps for those who missed or did not see the past couple of lectures, which with just reiterating what I spoke about in the past lectures to complement this one. So with that, let's get started with this beautiful lesson. As with always, we always say, he who writes your books sets your timeline. Time never was when we were not. If the life of time began, the time when we become, when we will be no more. Okay? So this is the reason why we go to our calendar, or go to the calendar. All right? We spoke about the Christianization of the Anglos and the Saxons as a result of the Christianization that was done by Pope Gregory the First and Augustine of Canterbury. We spoke about that in my past, the latter 2 lectures that I did. All right? But I also talked about the actual calendar. Okay, so let me show that. Please take notes. As we can see here, 1065 AD, Annus Dominius. All right, we know everyone has their perspective calendars, okay, that governs their political, religious, customs, etc. All right, you need a calendar. We know that the Gregorian calendar was created by Pope Gregory the 13th in 1582. Okay, the Gregorian calendar, which is the one you see here, which is the one you use currently, which is the year parallel, based upon that is the year 2025. And you can see the Gregorian calendar, ab urban condition means the founding of the city. And then they start in alphabetical order in regards to all the nations or countries, okay, that has a calendar, all right? We are not Armenian. We are not Assyrians. We're not Bolivians. We're not from Bengali. We're Berbers, okay? We are Berbers. There is no English reading our year applicable right now, okay, in 1065. But there is a Berber calendar applicable, which is the year 2015. As I said, the year 2025 is equivalent to the Berber year in the present day 2975. You have the Buddhist calendar, Burmese calendar, the Byzantine calendar, okay, very important. The Byzantine calendar, that deals with the Byzantine Empire, okay, of all those on the Iberian Peninsula, which we're going to talk about again today. You got the Coptic calendar, all right, this Discordian calendar, the Ethiopian calendar, the Hebrew calendar, the Hindu calendar, Vikra, Shaka, Kali, as well as the Hassanin, Igbo, Iranian, which we know are associated with the Iraq, which goes into the territories that are associated with the Islamic calendar. Okay, so you have the Iranian calendar, you have the Japanese calendar, the Javanese calendar, the Julian calendar, Julius Caesar, Korean calendar, the Minggu calendar, the Nagasaki calendar, the Seleucid calendar, the Taiz solar calendar, the Tibetan calendar, and whatever calendar that's out there. Okay, very important. But that's the main focal point that we need to understand in lieu of today's lesson. The Berbers of English and French and Spanish ancestry here in English in the Empire. We need to understand that in 1065 there is no English regnal year in accordance to English kings. Okay. Now we go to what's going on in the actual continent in reference to that time era, which in the Berbers to the Berbers calendar it will be 1065. I mean, it will be, what was it? It will be 2015. Okay, so in the Gregorian year it'd be 1065, but in the Berber year, for all Berbers, that year and that time era would have been 2015 AD, Annus Dominus, the year of our Lord. So let's look at the events. All right, remember the lecture is called "The Berbers of English, French, and Spanish Ancestry Here in North America." All right, like, share, subscribe. You see, December 24th, King Ferdinand of Leon the Great dies in Leon, Spain, after 11-year reign as the Emperor of all Spain. Now we know Spain is on the Iberian Peninsula. His kingdom is divided amongst his three sons, the eldest Sancho II, second Alfonso VI, and the youngest Garcia II. The kingdom of Galicia and Portugal become independent under the rule of Garcia. So when we're talking about these emperors, these are what they look like. Ferdinand. As you can see, a darker hue. All right, that's plain. You can see that. All right. Ferdinand the First of Leon. Okay, very important. Ferdinand the First was the Count of Castile. So that means that he was heirs or descendants of the Counts of Castile, of the Kingdom of Castile. Very important. From his uncle's death to 1029 until the King of Leon after defeating his brother-in-law in 1037. According to tradition, he was the first to have himself crowned Emperor of Spain in 1056, and his heirs carry on the tradition. He was the younger son of Sancho II of Narvaez and Munadana of Castile, and by his eldest fathers will recognize the supremacy of his eldest brother, Garcia Sanchez III of Narvaez, while Ferdinand inaugurated the rule of Narvaez Jimenez dynasty over the west of Spain. His rise to preeminence among the Christian rulers of the peninsula shifted the focus of power and culture westward after more than a century of Leonese decline. All right, very important, and we're focused on the complexion. All right, his nationality was a Spanish or Spain, it originated from the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, which goes back to either the Kingdom of Castile, Leon, and whatever dynasty that ruled at that particular time. All right, so that's Ferdinand the First. Let's look at Alfonso the Sixth. Look at his complexion. All right, look at his complexion. Very important. All this is going to come together in a second. All right. This is what's going on in Europe. Now we go to England. All right. Now we go to England. October 3rd, Northumbria revolts against Danish Sosing Godwinson, who is exiled. He takes refuge with his brother-in-law, Count Baldwin of Flanders, modern-day Belgium. The Northumbrian nobles choose Morcar as Earl of York. December 28th, Westminster Abbey is consecrated by King Edward the Confessor. So this is what we're concentrating on. What's going on in Europe and what's going on in England. Okay? What's going on in Europe and what's going on in England, because the title of this lecture is The Berbers of English, French, and Spanish ancestry here in the English Empire in America. We already know that they originated in the Maghreb. Okay, so so the Berbers of the Maghreb and the Iberian Peninsula are the same Berbers that descended down from the English. All right, and we know the English were Berbers because in 1065 there is no English written out here. So it's safe to say that Edward the Confessor was a Berber. He was a king of Wessex. Okay, and in that year, the year was 2015. All right, let's look. Let's just qualify that. The 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica defining the word or the term Berber. In spite of history of foreign conquest, all right, foreign conquest. We're talking about here. You know, when we're talking about colonization, whatever means you came and settled here, we know colony means just what it means, a colonist. When you say English colonist, it don't mean English people come over here and colonize it. It means somebody colonizing on the English soil. All right? So when you hear the word English colonist, it does not mean that people who came here were English. It does not mean that. It means colonists who immigrated or migrated here in England. All right? They were not the English people. All right? Very important to understand that. And we see that English didn't come until 1066. Prior to that, these people identified as English were previously called Berbers. All right? Very important. I'm going to go real slow for everyone so they can understand. In spite of a history of foreign conquest, Phoenician, Greeks, Romans, Vandals, Arabs, and French, okay? And when we say French, we're also talking about Franks, okay? The Berber physical type and the Berber temperament and nationality have persisted since the Stone Age. We've read this numerous times. The numerous invasions have naturally introduced a certain amount of foreign blood among the tribes fringing the Mediterranean, but those farther inland have preserved their racial purity to a surprising degree. Though considerable individual differences of types may be found in every village, the Berbers are distinctly a white race, and the majority would, if classed in European customs, pass unchallenged as Europeans. Okay? So that is a presumption that these Europeans are white race, and that the Berbers are of a white race. The only reason why they are of a white race is because of the amalgamation by way of force between Berber and Arabic contact, all right, which is associated with the Berber Islamism, okay, meaning Berbers adopting the religion or the custom of Islam, okay. It's going to say right here in this 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica, and this is the first English Encyclopedia Britannica. We don't need to go to any other Encyclopedia Britannica because this one is more befitting. Though considerable individual difference of types may be found in every village, the Berbers are distinctly a white race, and the majority would, if classed in European customs, pass unchallenged as Europeans. Dark hair and brown or hazel eyes are the rule. Blue-eyed blondes are found, but their frequency has been considerably overstated. So listen, y'all. The invaders who have most affected the Berbers race are who? The Arabs. Okay? Let's not forget that. The most the most barbaric nation, denoting to barbarians, that has affected the Berbers are the Arabs. But the two races with a common religion, often a common government, with the same tribal grouping, have failed to amalgamate to any great extent. Okay? To any great extent. This fact has been emphasized by Dr. R.T. Latham, who writes, all that is not Arabic in the Kingdom of Morocco, that's the Maghreb. All that is not Arabic in the French province of Algeria, that's the Iberian Peninsula. All that is not Arabic in Tunis, Tripoli, and Fezan, and Berber is Berber. Okay, so Moroccans, uh, those from Morocco, which are people who identify as Moors, those from Algeria, those from Tunis, Tripoli, Fezan. If you're not Arab, then you are a Berber, and Berbers and Arabs are not the same. The explanation lies in profound distinction of the character. Okay, their character. The Arab is a herdsman and a nomad. The Berber is an agriculturist and a townsman. The Arab has built his social structure on the Quran, which inculcates absolutism, aristocracy, theocracy. The Berber, despite his nominal Mohammedanism, is a democrat, with his Jimna or Wittenmont and his Qanun or unwritten code, the Magna Carta of the individual liberties opposed to the community's good. So we know, as English or Berbers, we know that the government structure that we ran and from our ancestry was called Witten or Wittenmont. Okay? And it said here in this Encyclopedia Britannica that the government of Wittenmont was that of the Berbers. And we see in 1065 there is no English Regnal year, but there's only a Berber Regnal year. So it's safe to say that these English kings, now called English kings, were in fact Berber kings. All right? Which I'm approving. All right? Because we have an ancestry connected to the French, the Spanish, as well as what we now call English. All right? We all one family, but we are of darker hue. That must be understood. All right? Let's look at it. For us to understand that, let's go here. Let's look at the barbarian kingdoms, which we talked about. Barbarian kingdoms. Pay very close attention. Political map of continental Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, and 4th Circa era, showing the remaining Eastern Roman Empire and the Eastern Mediterranean and the new barbarian kingdoms and the former territories of the Western Roman Empire. Okay? Very important to listen to what your king is saying. Let's make this clear for you. The barbarian kingdoms were states founded by various non-Romans. So they're talking about after Rome fell, all right, in the 4th century, all right. They're talking about after Rome fell in the 4th century when they invaded Great Britain, which it was called Britain, okay. It wasn't called Great Britain; it was called Britain, all right, or Britain. So it says the barbarian kingdoms were states founded by various non-Roman, primarily of Germanic people. Key word, Germanic people. Everybody write that down. In Western Europe and North Africa, following the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. Okay? Following the collapse of the Roman Empire. The barbarian kingdoms were the principal government in Western Europe and in the early Middle Ages. The time of the barbarian kingdom is considered to have come to an end with Charlemagne. Charlemagne was a Frankish king. Okay? Charlemagne was king of the Franks. All right? Which are associated with the German people. Okay? He fit right in that classification as the German people from Scandinavia. Very important we understand that. They're known or associated with what we call the great heathens or the heathens. Okay? We know what a heathen is. If you don't, go look it up. So it says, considered to have come to an end with Charlemagne's coronation as emperor in 800, though a handful of small Anglo-Saxon kingdoms persisted until being unified by Alfred the Great. Okay? Once again, only a handful of kingdoms persisted until being unified by Alfred the Great, which then it became the kings of Wessex. So we're talking about all this area right here, okay? All this area dealing with the barbarian kingdom, and the barbarian kingdoms are not the Anglo-Saxons or well, I don't want to say Saxons. Just to say they're not the Anglos. Okay, the barbarian kingdoms are not the Anglos because the Anglos are from the Anglosphere. All right, but yet those who immigrated or migrated to the overseas possession known now as UK or Great Britain or Britain, before prior to that becoming Britain, it was only composed as an overseas possession of our overseas estate. Okay, very important as a part of the English Empire. Kingdom persisted being unified by Alfred the Great. This is called the Hepatarchy. Okay, this is called the Hepatarchy, which we'll talk about in a second. The formation of barbarian kingdom was a complicated, gradual, largely unintentional process. The origin can be traced to the Roman state failing to handle barbarian migrants on the imperial borders, which led to both invasion and invitation to imperial territory from the 3rd century onward. Very important. Let's go a little deeper. Etymology. The barbarian kingdom is a collective term commonly used by modern historians to designate the kingdoms established in Western Europe after the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. This is resulted from what we call the Great Migration period. Okay? The term has been criticized by some scholars on account of barbarian being a pejorative term. Some historians also consider barbarian kingdoms to be a misnomer since the kingdoms were supported to a large degree staffed by Roman elites, which were barbarians. Okay? Very important to understand that. We get the drift. Let's go a little further. Formation. Background of the barbarian kingdoms. And we're not talking about Anglos, all right? Probably Saxons fit in that category, but not the Anglos, okay? Which we know are Berbers. We know he who writes your books set your timeline, okay? They're telling the story, but we're not telling it, and every time we let them tell our story, it comes out wrong. It comes out wrong. The rise of the barbarian kingdom is a territory previously governed by Western Roman Empire was a gradual, complex, and largely unintentional process, as it stated. The origin can ultimately be traced to the migration of large numbers of barbarians, non-Roman people, into the territory of the Roman Empire. Although the migration period from 300 to 600 is often referred to as the barbarian invasion. Okay? The barbarian invasion. Migrations were spurred not only by invasion but also by invitation. Inviting people from beyond the imperial frontier to settle Roman territory was not a new policy and something that had been done for several times by emperors in the past, most for economic, agricultural, or military purposes. Okay? Very important for us to understand that. And with that, we'll go into what we call the Great Heathen Army. The Great Heathen Army. The Great Heathen Army, also known as the Viking Great Army, was a coalition of Scandinavian warriors who invaded England in AD 865. Once again, I repeat. The Great Heathen Army, known as the Viking Great Army, was a coalition of Scandinavian warriors who invaded England AD in 865. Since the late 8th century, the Vikings have been engaging in raids on centers of wealth such as what? Monasteries. All right? We know that under the English Byzantine monastery, which resulted from the for us being forced to their Christianity, the Anglo-Saxons had to convert or reform the monasteries, which were at that time being raided prior to the Reformation by Vikings. So we see here that the great heathen armies were those who are Vikings that invaded and stole the wealth that was stored in the monasteries. The great heathen army was much larger and aimed to conquer and occupy the four kingdoms of East Anglia, Northumbria, Mercia, and what? Wessex. Right there. This is the Heptarchy. This is called the Heptarchy. Before it became the king of Wessex, it was tribes known as the Heptarchy. And these are all Berbers because we didn't have the first English speaking out here till William the Conqueror invaded England in 1066. The Heptarchy was a division of Anglo/Saxon England between the 6th, 8th, you heard us say 6th century. We know the Great Migration appeared between the 5th and the 6th century. Okay? So it says the Heptarchy was a division of Anglo-Saxon between the 6th and 8th century and to petty kingdoms, conventionally the 7 kingdoms of East Anglia, Essex, Kent, Mercia, Northumbria, Sussex, and Wessex. It's right there. All right? The period of petty kingdoms came to an end in the 8th century. That's when Charlemagne had his coronation. The small kingdoms and tribes that were came to a unification, but who? Alfred the Great. The period of petty kingdoms came to an end in the 8th century when England was divided into 4 dominant kingdoms: East Anglia, Mercia, Northumbria, and Wessex. Okay, so it's right there. I'm not going to even go into the history. Let's go back to what we call the Great Heathen Army. Who are the heathens? Because it's not those who were of the Heptarchy. Okay, they were the tribes that were unified by Alfred the Great, who was a Berber. He wasn't a barbarian. Okay, just look at the belligerents. Belligerents, Vikings, and the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Anyone see that? The Vikings and the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. The Danes, the Norwegians, the Swedes, the North, and Gales. Okay? We already talked about them. We know the first discovery of North America was by Eric Leifton. And Eric Leifton was a Northman. They got their information from the Danes, which didn't call it Newfoundland. They called it Vinland. Okay? And Newfoundland or Newfoundland is within the continent of what we call North America. All right? It's a part of the continent of what you call North America, which we know is within the English Empire, which is in the continent of North America, based upon the maps. All right? So the Vikings were the Danes, Norwegians, Swedes, the North, and the Gales. All right? Very important to understand that. The commanders and leaders were the kings of Wessex, or the kings of the other tribes, okay, that were unified by who? Alfred the Great. All right? One important person that we have to take a look at is who? Ethelwulf. Okay? Ethelwulf. Because Alfred the Great right here. This is Alfred the Great right here. So who is Ethelwulf? The one who helped fight off the Vikings from whatever name they choose to call themselves, because they all descended from what we call Germanic people. Okay? They all descended from what we call Germanic people or German people. Very important for you to understand that. All right? So let's look at Ethelwulf. We can start right here. King of Wessex. When Ethelwulf succeeded the throne of Wessex in 839, his experiences as sub-king of Kent had given him valuable training in kingship, and he in turn made his own sons sub-kings. According to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle is the genealogical manuscript concerning the genealogy of the English king going all the way back to Adam and Eve. Okay? According to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, on his ascension, he gave his son Ancestry the kingdom of the people of Kent. We're not talking about Alfred the Great great-grandson. Ancestry the first of the kingdom of Kent, they're talking about, and the kingdom of East Saxon, Essex, and of the people of Surrey and of South Saxon, Sussex. However, Ethelwulf did not give Acerton the same power as his father had given him. And although Acerton attested his father's charters as king, he does not appear to have been given the power to the issue of his own charters. Ethelwulf exercised authority in the southeast and made regular visits there. He governed Wessex and Kent as a separate spirit, and assembly and each kingdom were only attended by nobility of that country. All right, very important to understand that. Let's take a look at this depiction here. Depiction of Ethelwulf in the late 13th century genealogical chronicle of the English kings. Let's take a look at this picture. Depiction of Ethelwulf in the 13th century genealogical chronicle of the English king. All right, this is in the 13th century, but yet he lived in the 8th century. All right, this is from the 13th century, but yet he lived in the 8th century. As you can see here, look at his complexion. Just like Imre Mahasad said, dark-skinned Anglo-Saxons. Dark-skinned. Look at the hands. Look at the face. And this is on a genealogical chronicle. Okay? What genealogical chronicle it is? What do they call it? Genealogical chronicle of the English kings? They're talking about this one right here. Genealogical Chronicle of the Kings of England to Edward IV, circa 1461. This is the illuminated manuscript, brothers and sisters. Let's read it. Likely produced in London in the third quarter of the 5th century, the Genealogical Chronicle of Kings of England to Edward IV, known in University of Penn manuscript roll 1066. And you know, William the Conqueror invaded England in what? 1066. It's a compilation tour de force of the greatest hits of medieval historians, assimilating the works of Godfrey of Monmouth, William of Malmesbury, and Ranulph Higgins, among others. The roll is an imposing physical presence and is staggering 37 feet and 13 membrane long. It chronicles the lineage of Yorkish King Edward IV, beginning with Adam and Eve and ending with Edward IV. The chronicle also has a complex illustrative schema containing 174 bust-length portraits and colors, 5 mandorlos and tinted full-length portraits, and 80 roundels containing crowns, as well as several classic chronicle-type scenes including Temptation of Adam, Noah in the Flood, and the City of Jerusalem. The Latin text is written in the standard late medieval Anglicana hand. So there you see it right here, brothers and sisters, of Ethelwulf. Okay? Of Ethelwulf. And Ethelwulf is the father of who? Alfred the Great. Ethelwulf is the father of Alfred the Great. We must understand that. And Ethelwulf was dark-skinned, brother like us, then it's sure to say that his descendants are as well. Okay? His descendants are as well. All right, so we go back to the barbarian kingdom. It says that when barbarians started to migrate into what we call Britain, England at that time, Alfred the Great unified what we call the Berbers, because they weren't called English till William the Conqueror came in. Okay, very important to make that distinction. Okay, but I'm going to show you that the Berbers, who are in fact now called English, are the same people known as the French, Spanish, because we all have the same ancestry. What is that? Berbers. Let's look at it. Let's go to the German people first. German people. Roman authors first described Germany near the Rhine. When we know when the Great Migration came about, it was crossing the Rhine. Okay, known as the Great Migration or the Barbarian Invasion, or the known, and then in Rome it was called the Barbarian Conspiracy. Okay, the Roman Civil War. What was it? 305? I forgot the date. It says Roman authors first described Germany near the Rhine in the first century BCE era. We know BCE is the Berber calendar, all right, and we know all the kings back that time were Berbers, all right. It don't mean before Christian era. Well, it might mean before Christian era, but we know it's the Berbers did have or did practice Christian. They were Christians, okay, or they did follow the religion of Christ, okay. Very important to understand that, and not that religion that was imposed upon them by Rome through the conversion of Christianity from the Roman Catholic Church. All right, let's get it. Under Emperor Augustine, the Romans attempted to conquer a large part of Germania between the Rhine and Elbe, but withdrew after their shocking defeat of the Battle of Teutoburg Forest in the 9th century 9th Christian Circa era. The Romans continued to manage the Germanic frontier, carefully meddling in the cross-border politics and constructing long fortified borders, the lines of Germanicus. From 166 to 180 Circa era, Rome was embroiled in conflict against the Germanic Marcomanni and Quadi with their ally, which was known as the Marcomannic Wars. After this major disruption, new groupings of what? Germanic people appeared for the first time in historical record, such as who? The Franks, the Goths, the Saxons, the Alemanni, during what? During the migration period. It's right here. During the migration period, such as Germanic people entering the Roman Empire and eventually establishing their own barbarian kingdoms within the territory of the Western Roman Empire itself. Over time, the Franks became the most powerful of them, conquering many of the others. Eventually, the Frankish king Charlemagne claimed the title of the Holy Roman Emperor for himself in 800. And at that time, we know that Alfred the Great, who was not a barbarian, he was a Berber who unified all those tribes who were Berbers, in fact, based upon what we call unifying, known as the Kings of Wessex. All right? Very, very important. You see the color of their skin. All right? You see the color of their skin. So once again, Franks, Goths, Saxons, and Lemni. These are all associated with what we call the heathen army. The great heathen army. Where's it at? Let's go back there. The great heathen army. All right. So let's not forget that. All right. Vikings, the Anglo-Saxons, if you know, the Anglo-Saxons were known as different tribes of Berbers until they were unified by Alfred the Great, and they were still called Berbers, and they didn't become English until William the Conqueror invaded England. Okay? Very important for us to understand that. All right? Now let's go here. We know we have, let's see, let's go to our map now. Let's go to our map. Now, you might not see it on the map, but on the map, it does show a map of the English Empire and the continent of America, Virginia, Maryland, Carolina, New York, New Jersey, New England, and Pennsylvania. So let's go to the map. So what does it show is the eastern seaboard of North America. It does not include New France, only those modern states that we have now, all right? But it does say within the English Empire, okay? Within the English Empire. All right. Let's see if I can bring it up for you. I hate when the mouse does this. Come on, I had it. Right here. A map of the English Empire in America. I want to blow up too much bigger because let me see if I can. Oh boy, right there. A map of the English Empire in America. Okay, this map was by the gentleman Robert Morton. Right here, Robert Morton, 1650 to 1703. We know the Crown of England was right here in New Jersey. Okay, it's called His Majesty's Council. Watch yesterday's lesson to get that information. Right, the Crown of New Jersey was right here. The Crown of England was right here in New Jersey. Now we come to another map. Again, I talked about this in part two. I mean, in my last lecture, I left off on this. All of a sudden now, in this new map, a new map of the English Empire in America. Okay, it not only shows the corresponding states that we showed in the first map, but now it shows Newfoundland and New France. Okay, it shows Newfoundland and New France. So it's very important to go back to the history of Newfoundland and New France because Newfoundland it was associated going all the way back to, as we said, the German people. All right, the Danes, the North, with the finding of North America and a territory known as we call Newfoundland, okay, or then called Vinland by the Danes, okay, and we know that they were migratory people who migrated across the Rhine, okay, through the migration period known as the Barbarian invasion, okay. All of a sudden now they get first dibs over here of the what we call Newfoundland, then called Vinland, all right, which is a part of what you now call North America. But the map doesn't say North America. It says a map of the English Empire in North America. So the English Empire is within North America, and everything that you see that's not in America are called overseas possessions. Okay? Overseas possessions. Here in this map, you see not just you see New France. Okay? You see New France as well as on the other side of New France, you have New Spain. So you have New Spain, New France, that's not even being talked about within the English Empire. Okay, and we know when we look at the European colonization of North America, which we look at right now. European colonization of North America from 1492 to 17. What is that? 1750. European colonization of North America from 1492 to 1750. Okay, let's look at this map. Now, it's not like the map I just showed you. Okay, this is something that somebody just drew up and just cut and pasted. All right, dates, denoting to the time, the place in question, time and place in question. All right, here you see the 13 British colonies. Okay, so when you say the English colonies, that's an improper way to describe a colonist, because the English people were not colonists, because this was in fact the English Empire, okay, in the continent of North America, all right, who had relations with France and Spain, being that the overseas Spain and France also had overseas possessions known as those possessions in what we call the Iberian Peninsula. Okay? Overseas possession in the Iberian Peninsula. All right, which we're going to discuss in a second. So the 13 colonies is before America even came into existence, the word America. This is before the colonies even came to existence. This is before the profiteers. We're talking about the British colonies and those that the British kings and queens allowed to come over and settle as colonists within the what? The English Empire. Okay? The English, all is the English Empire, because the English were not just confined, if it's the English Empire, just this little box over here in the red. That sounds crazy, okay? And especially if they're intermarrying with the kings of France and the kings of Spain, okay? French, British, Spaniard. Very important to understand the history of the French, the Spanish, and the British, because the British are the result of the overthrow of the connection that we had with the French and the Spanish going back to their ancient houses. So what house do you come from, my brothers and sisters? What is your family house? That's the question you should be asking yourself. That's the question you should be asking yourself. You're either of French descent, either of Spanish descent, or of English descent, which in fact are Berbers. And the Berbers and the French and the Spanish are in fact Berbers. Why? Because I'm going to prove it. Okay? I'm going to prove it. All right? So let's look at New Spain and New France. Because we already know about what we call the English Empire. All right, and we also know about the New English Empire, which New France was added to it. Okay, New France was added to the New English Empire when it was already an English Empire. Okay, before conquest and invasions of those who immigrated to England. Okay, such as the Danes, the North, the Swedes. Who else they said? The Danes, Norwegians, Swedes, North, and Gales. How did they know about this new world? Who told them about the new world? Because the Danes were sitting as kings. The first king, English king, as a Danish king, was Swing Forkbear. Okay? Was Swing Forkbear. We talked about that in the prior lesson. I ain't got time to go through it again today. Okay? So how did these Danish kings, who were in fact Vikings, okay, who informed the North, okay, about this big landmass over here called North America, which you assume that it was abandoned, okay? This is a complete lie. Let's look at it. New France. New France was a territory colonized by France in North America, beginning with the exploration of Gulf of St. Lawrence by Jacques Cartier in 1534, and ending with the succession of New France to what? Great Britain and Spain in 1763. That is known as the Treaty of Paris. Great Britain was 3 separate kingdoms unified in 1707. In 1534, they were not unified. They didn't become unified till 1707. So when France surrendered territory to North America, to what we call Britain, it was the Kingdom of England. It was not the Kingdom of Scotland, because Great Britain is composed of England, Scotland, and in Ireland. Very important. Don't let them fool you with the wordplay. All right, so as we can see, if the English Empire, based upon the map, was here in the eastern seaboard, all right, as they say, and then the new map showed New France as well as Newfoundland, which is up here, then what's going on over here? Because New France is already spoken for, English is already spoken for, the only thing that's not spoken for is what? Spain, or New Spain, all right, which we're going to get into. Let's look at the rulers of the kings of France. Okay, and we're talking about these kings. These are French kings under the nationality as Franks. Okay, they're Frankish kings. Very important to understand. We know Charlemagne was king of the Franks, but sometimes when they had conflict with opposing parties, sometimes they aligned themselves. Okay, they were warm with themselves, but what do you say? Enemy of mine is what's that saying? An enemy of my. How did that saying go? An enemy of mine is a friend of mine. Something as opposed to another enemy that they don't like. Okay, so they agreed to put their dispute aside because they had a greater issue from another opposing enemy that would affect them both. Okay, that's a better way of saying it. All right, so it's very important to understand that New France was composed of rulers from what we call the House of Capet, which we call no, not the House of Capet, the House of Balios in Bourbon, which goes all the way back to Francis the First. We got the first ruler of the kings of France in North America. We talking about New France and Louis the 15th. So just look at these people real quick. Louis the 15th. Just look at their houses. All I'm concerned about is the houses. All right, what house you are a part of? We're not looking at faces, the color of the skin. None of that matters to me. I'm concerned about the history. Okay. Louis the 15th was from what house? He's from the House of Bourbon. Everyone see that? Write that down. He was from the House of Bourbon. All right? He was a Catholic. Let's check out Francis the First. The first one. Louis the 15th was the last one. Francis the First was the first one. Let's watch to see what house he comes from. Houses are important. He comes from the house of Balios and Acclamain. Once again, he comes from the house of Balios and Acclamain. So you have the house of Bourbon and the house of Balios and Acclamain. These are houses from what we call the Spanish Empire. Okay? These are houses composed from the Spanish Empire going to Queen Isabella and Ferdinand II. Okay? You must know your history. Let's look at it right here. Here in North America, the Spanish Empire, sometimes referred to of the Hispanic monarchy or the Catholic monarchy, was a colonial empire. Here, a colonial empire that existed between 1492 and 1976, in conjunction with the Portuguese Empire. You hear that? In conjunction with the Portuguese Empire, and usher in the European Age of Discovery. You hear that? Usher in the European Age of Discovery from 1492 to 1750. All right. Let's look at the belligerents. Right here. New France, House of Bourbon, and the House of Balios. Okay? All going back to the Capetine House. Okay? The Capetine descend down from the Carolingian, and the Carolingian descend down from the Merovingian house, and the Merovingian house was founded by who? Clovis the First. Okay? You must know your history. It might not seem important, but when it comes to being part of my father's house, it is. Okay? Very important. All right? So as we can see, New Francis and the kings of New France from Louis XIV to Francis I were composed of the House of Bourbons and the House of Balios. You also got the Capetine, Habsburg, and Transmoria House to follow, let alone the ones that predate them. That succeeded them. All right? So you must know your history. These Spanish empires are not the kings of Castile. Okay, these are not the jure kings of what we call the kings on the Iberian Peninsula. How do we know that? Because we are Berbers of the English, French, Spanish ancestry. inhering the English Empire. We talk about New France and New Spain, okay? And we already know this says the English Empire in America and the New English Empire within in America, okay? So all this is taking place in America, involving all these houses, the Berbers, the Valios, and the House of Capet. Let's click that real quick. Let's see how important the House of Capet is. Or Capitan. Okay, Capitan Dynasty. Go to the main point. Where do I want to go? Right here. That's cool. In 987, Hugh Capet was elected to succeed Louis V, of the Carolingian dynasty. Remember, I told you that all those houses descend down from the Capitan dynasty descend down from the Carolingian descend down from the Merovingian, and the Merovingian descend down from who? Clovis I. And they never claimed to be descendants of God, brothers and sisters. They never claimed to descend down from God. How we know it? Let's prove it. First, let me just read this part and then I'll prove it. In 927, Hugh Capet was elected and succeeded by Louis V of the Carolingian dynasty that had ruled France for over 3 centuries by a process of associating elder sons with them in the kingship. The early Capitan, Spanish Empire, established a hereditary succession in their family and transformed a theoretically electoral kingship into a sacral one. Okay? As we said, where is it at? Where is it at? The Spanish Empire. Where is the Spanish Empire? I just had it. Okay, yeah, Spanish Empire. All right, right here. So when we look at the Spanish Empire, we see the Capitan dynasty, right? We see the Capitan. It's right there. You can't miss it. Can't miss it. The House of Valios, the House of Bourbons were kings of France, Frankish kings, that descended down from the Capitan dynasty, and the Capitan dynasty are descended down from. And when you go to the Castilian Civil War, it's gonna go into this Trans-Zamora. If you can remember, when I get there to remember Trans-Zamora, that could go into what we call the Castilian War, and it's going to involve the Habsburg as well. All this are associated with Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. All right. So the Capitan dynasty. Let's go back there real quick. The Capitan dynasty, which is a Frankish dynasty, not French, Frankish, okay, is a branch of a Robertian agnatic succession, and the Carolingians through the female line. You hear that? Matrilineal, not patrilineal. Once again, matrilineal, not patrilineal. Who are the Carolingians? Let's see. Remember who was king of Rome? Was Charlemagne. Carolingians, known variously as the Carolingians, Carolingi, or Carolings, Carolinger, or Carlings, was a Frankish noble family named after Charles Martel and his grandson, who? Charlemagne, the Roman ruler. Okay? It's right there, brothers and sisters. You have to connect the dots, okay? The dynasty consolidated its power in the 8th century, eventually making the offices of mayor of the palace and Duke ex Princeps Francorum hereditary, and becoming the de facto rulers. You hear that? Becoming the de facto rulers of the Franks as the real power behind the Merovingian throne. Who are the Merovingians? Let's look at it. Merovingian dynasty, which had ruled the Franks, was overthrown with the consent of the papacy and the aristocracy of Pepin the Short, son of Martel, and was crowned queen of the Franks. Who are the Merovingians? Let's look at them. Remember these names, because when we're talking about the Merovingians, we're going into the history of Gaul, and the Arabs, or the Umayyad dynasty, invaded Gaul. Okay? After they invaded the Maghreb, they invaded Iberian Peninsula. Once they invaded the Iberian Peninsula, they invaded Gaul. And Gaul was under the authority of what we call the Duchess or the Dukes of Aquitaine. Okay? The Dukes of Aquitaine, who aligned themselves with the Carolingians and the Merovingians as a result, for the sake of the internal conflict, as a result of an internal opposition that was coming from abroad. Okay, so they aligned themselves for the sake of the landmass. Okay, they can go back to their own dispute later. Okay, so the Merovingian dynasty was the ruling family of the Franks, from which the Carolingians, the Capetines, the Berbers, the Valios, and everybody else. Okay, and we know that the Plantagenet dynasty were at war with the Capetine dynasty. Okay, it's called the Plantagenet rivalry, or what we know as the 100-Year War. Okay, you must understand this history. It says here. The dynasty name medieval Latin Merovingi, hence the word, as we go to what we call the matrix, the Merovingi, all right, the designer. All right, he said you ain't never getting out of the matrix. All right, and I'm trying to get you out, so I must be Leo. All right, because we're dealing with the history of the Merovingi. Okay, derived from an unattested. You hear that? Frankish form, akin to attested Old English, with the final ing meaning belonging to. It's a suffix. Okay, the name derives from the Salian king Merovic, who is at the center of many legends. Unlike the Anglo/Saxon royal genealogy, and we know when we go to royal genealogy, King Ethelwulf, one of the main figures in regards to conflicts of Vikings invading Britain, which we know as Ethelwulf, okay? He was in the Anglo-Saxon genealogical, which is the 36-foot manuscript showing all those who have darker skin, okay? Versus the Merovingian, which never claimed to descend down from Adam and Eve, okay? Nor is there any evidence that they were regarded as a sacred people. The Merovingians' long hair distinguished them from other Franks, though, who commonly cut their hair short. So as we can see, that the Merovingians are those who descended down from Clovis the First. Can I find them? Right here. The first well-known Merovingian king was Childeric, his son Clovis. So Clovis the First descended down from Childeric. All right, converted to Nicene Christianity, and for that you have to go back to Constantine. Okay, you got to go back to Constantine, and that deals with the Great Roman Civil War. As a result of the land that he gave to his heirs, his descendants, which ultimately came to an end, which started the Great Migration into what we call Britain by what we call the Norse, the Danes, the Vikings, the Scandinavians, the Swedes, etc., known as barbarians. You must understand what's going on. All right? You must understand what's going on. So Merovingians never claimed to be descendants of gods. We must understand that. But yet, these Merovingians, which were Franks, which we know are associated with the German people, which were Vikings, stormed the monastery, okay, in the Great Heathen War, okay? It said they took the treasures of the monasteries. Very important to understand that. This, we're talking about the Spanish Empire over here, all these houses over here. We must comprehend what's going on. Great heathen. Vikings, Danes, Norwegians, Swedes, Norse, and Gauls. Now they mentioned Gaul, didn't they? They said something about Gaul. Let's go back. Where was that at? Let's see where I want to go. Oh, I know where I was. Was that at Francis? No, Spanish Empire. That's where I was. Spanish Empire. Okay, so the Spanish Empire. Very, very important. We know that the Capitan, House of Bourbon, the House of Valios, which are over here in North America. All right, because they got the kings, Frankish kings ruling here in North America. All right, when we know the map says we're in the English Empire, North America, and we know New France didn't get added into the equation later, and New Spain is not even added to the map. Why? Because of the Spanish affiliation with the Roman Catholics. Okay, this is very important. Watch this breakdown. Where I go with this next. All right, where's it at? Kingdom of Castile. The Kingdom of Castile was a party in the Iberian Peninsula during the Middle Ages. Okay, very important to the Middle Ages. So we back in the 10th century. Okay, 11th century, 12th century. All right, very important to understand that who are the kings and from the Kingdom of Castile. Hold that thought. Hold your thought. Let's start here. 100-Year War. All right, the main argument is France. Okay, New France, New Spain. And we're trying to prove that these are, in fact, Berbers. Okay? These are, in fact, Berbers. The Hundred Year War was a conflict between the kingdoms of England and France and a civil war in France during the late Middle Ages. It emerged from feudal disputes over the Duchess of Aquitaine and was triggered by a claim to the French throne made by Edward III, the King of England. Okay? The King of England. When we talk about the French throne, we're going back to the Carolingians, we're going back to the Merovingians, we're talking about the Clovis I, we're going back to the Bourbons, we're going back to the House of Valios and all the other houses. They were at war with the Kingdom of England all the way back to the kings of Wessex, okay? And at that time, they were warring against Vikings as well, okay? So we were not just warring with Frankish kings, but we were warring with Vikings as well. All right, as you can see, they were all associated with the heathens because the heathens one of the Franks were associated with one of the armies of the heathen. Okay, very important. The 100-Year War was a conflict between the Kingdom of England and France and a civil war in France during the late Middle Ages. It emerged from a feudal dispute over who? The Duchess of Aquitaine. Okay? The Duchess of Aquitaine was triggered by a claim to a French throne made by Edward III of England. This war goes back even further, though, brothers and sisters. This conflict goes back even further. That's what we need to discuss, all right? That's what we need to discuss because we understand that this is in the 14th century. Let's go back and predate this conflict as a result of disputes over the Duchess of Aquitaine, because the Arabs or the Muslims or the Arabs, they wanted Aquitaine as well. Okay, they wanted Aquitaine as well. How I know it? Just look at it. Duchess of Aquitaine. The Duchess of Aquitaine, personal union with England. The Romanists had become the dominant power in southern western France by the end of the last century by marriage rather than conquest. Their possessions passed into what? The Angevin Empire under the English crown by 1154. Did you hear that? Hear that? We're talking about the Duchess of Aquitaine. The Angevin Empire passed to the English crown. Okay? That's what we're talking about. All right? Let's go back, predate that. Let's go all the way up. The Duchess of Aquitaine was a historical fiefdom located in the western central and southern area of present-day France. South of the River Loire, the full extent of the duchy as well as its name fluctuated greatly over the centuries. At its time, comprised much of what is now southern, southwestern, including Gascony and central France. A map of France in 1154, the pink area in Lower France under Eleanor Aquitaine and her husband Henry II, King of England. Once again, Henry II, King of England. Eleanor was a queen from France. Okay, very, very important. Who is Eleanor Aquitaine? And she controlled the Duchess of Normandy. Eleanor of Aquitaine was the Duchess of Aquitaine from 1137 to 1204, Queen of France from 1137 to 1152, as the wife of Louis VII, and Queen of England from 1154 to 1189, as the wife of who? King Henry II. Never mind the picture, that's a lie. King Henry II, son of Godfrey V, Count of Anjou, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. Okay, and all the Duchess of Aquitaine were his sons. Okay, all the Duchess of Aquitaine were his sons. We must understand that. Let's see. Okay. These are the Dukes of Aquitaine. All right. Clovis the First. We were warm with them at one particular time. Okay. Clovis the First, Merovingian, Carolingian, Capitan, Balios, Bourbon, Savoy, all these houses were Frankish Roman Catholic kings, but when they were invaded by other foreigners, they aligned themselves. Okay? We know Eleanor of Aquitaine was the Duke of Aquitaine, or the Duchess, from 1137 to 1204. And she was married to who? Henry II, son of Godfrey V, Count of Anjou, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. We must understand this history. All right? Now let's go to the Dukes of Aquitaine. We said the Duchess of Aquitaine, now the Dukes of Aquitaine. And why is Aquitaine so important? As you can see here, the House of Plantagenet. We had a lot of de facto rulers, but it wasn't until the Plantagenet came upon the scene by it being established by Godfrey V, Count of Anjou, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. This is when it came to its height. Okay. Prior to that, there was nothing but wars, conquest, conflict. Henry I was, as we know, the son of William the Conqueror. Okay? This is not Henry the First. This is Henry the Second. Okay, I don't know why they did like that, but that's Henry the Second. Henry the Second was the son of Godfrey the Fifth Caravan Jew. There's Henry the Second, Richard the First, Lionheart. Okay, time immemorial. John. All right, there go John. Henry the Second. Henry the Third, the father of. Then you go Edward the First, Edward the Second, Edward the Third. They're all family brothers and sisters. There you go Edward the First, Edward the Second, Edward the Third. Plantagenet kings. Right there, Edward the Third. They got legislation right here in New Jersey. Okay, so it's very important to understand how important the Dukes of Aquitaine and the Duchess of Aquitaine was to that landmass that we know as the Iberian Peninsula that inhabits Spain and France. Okay, all right, Spain and France is on that continent. Okay, and they are family. They are Berbers. How I know it? Let's go back to the origin of the Duchess of Aquitaine. Let's go to Odo the Great. Let's go to Odo the Great. Hold that thought. Okay. Odo the Great. Check it out. The Berbers of English, French, and Spanish ancestry had here in the English Empire. I'm making a connection. Odo the Great. Odo the Great was Duke of Aquitaine by 700 AD. His territory included Vasconia and southwest Gaul and the Duchess of Aquitaine. At this point, located northeast of the river Garnaine, a rim extended from Loire to Paris with the capital Tozali. He fought the Carolingian Franks and made alliances with Moors to combat them. Did you hear that? Odo the Great, the Duchess of Aquitaine, which included the English people, the English kings from Henry II all the way up to Edward III, were Duchess of Aquitaine and Dukes of Aquitaine, okay, controlling the Duchess of Aquitaine. As we can see here, it says right here that Odo the Great fought against what? The Carolingian Franks and made alliances with the Moors to combat them. Okay, so we have French king, we have a French, not a Frankish king, but a French king align himself with Frankish kings. Align himself with people identified as Moors. Okay, but they're not Moors because Moors is an improper term. How we know it? I'm gonna show you. All right. So it says that the Duchess of Aquitaine at the point located northeast of the river Garonne, a rim extended from the Loire of the Pyrenees, with the capital Tozali. He fought the Carolingian Franks and made alliances with Moors to combat who? The Carolingian Franks. The Carolingian Franks descended down from the Merovingians. The Merovingians were never considered to be descendants of God like the Anglo-Saxons, nor is there any evidence of them being sacred. Okay? But apparently, Odo the Great, being the Dukes of Aquitaine, going all the way back from the 8th century all the way up to the 14th century, okay, which involved the kings of England, it said that they were they are allying themselves with people identified by Misnama as Moors against the Carolingian Franks. Okay? Very important. We know Franks were invaders. We know Franks were Germans because they came over later through the Great Migration period. Okay? As shown. All right. So we see that Odo the Great said he allied himself with Moors. He didn't say Arabs. He said Moors. Okay? Moors is a mixture of Arabs and Berbers amalgamating, bringing forth the children identified as Moors. Okay? But now you need to correct that term by calling yourself who you truly are based upon the alliances that were made with the kings of French kings. Okay? Because you have to be a part of your father's house. I just showed you 1065, there were no English kings. There were only Berbers. Okay? There were only Berbers. In England, Britain, Iberian Peninsula, as well as on the Maghreb. How I'm going to prove it? Let's get it. Before we deal with, we see it said Odo the Great allied himself with Moors as a result of Carolingian Franks. But we're going to see that the Carolingian Franks aligned themselves with Odo the Great when Arabs tried to invade the Iberian Peninsula. You see that? I just said it. I'm going to show you that Odo the Great aligned himself with Frankish kings such as Charlemagne, Pepin the Short. Why? Because when the Arabs invaded what we call the Maghreb, they went over to what we call the Iberian Peninsula. Once they conquered that, they went right straight to Gaul. How you know it? And all this was at the expense of the Berbers who were enslaved by the Arabs in the 11th century. How I know it? Let's just look at it. Berbers and Islam. Listen, brothers. During the initial Umayyad conquest of the Iberian Peninsula in 711 to 712 AD, Berbers formed their own military united based on tribal allegiances with little contact with who? Arabs. You hear that? Who did the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica said mostly affected the Berbers? The Arabs. Okay? That's what he said. This was only Iberian. This was in the Maghreb as well. Let's go there first. Muslim conquest in Maghreb. Then we'll make our way up to what we call Iberian Peninsula, which involves Spanish, French, and English alliances. Okay, and they were all, in fact, Berbers. You can't make this up. I want my coffee up. I might as well put up the conquest of Levant in here too as well, because conquest of Levant is the land of the holy people. Okay, the conquest of the Levant was the conquest of the land of the children of the kingdom of Judah. Okay, or the children of the ancient Canaanites, whatever the name you try to throw them, that is us. Okay, conquest of the Levant. I spoke about this already. I have to continue to go through it until you all comprehend. Muslim conquest of Levant. Let's start there first. Work our way up. Ooh, that's hot. Conquest of Levant, the Holy Land. The Muslim conquest of Levant or Arab conquest of Syria, conquest of Byzantine Syria by the Rashidun Khalifa. A part of, now remember that Christianity and Islam came upon at the same time, striking parallel time. They came up about the same time. Okay? It says here, a part of a wider Arab-Byzantine war, the Levant was brought under Arab Muslim rule and developed into a provincial region by Bilal al-Sham. Okay? 1 second. Clash between Arabs and Byzantines on the southern Levante border of the Byzantine Empire had occurred during the lifetime of Muhammad. Okay? With the Battle of Mu'tah in 629 AD. Okay? 629 AD Christian era. Very important to understand that Arabs were warned with the Byzantine army, okay, or the Byzantine Empire in Levant. Levant is the Holy Land, brothers and sisters, the land of the ancient Israelites, or the land of the tribe of Judah. Nonetheless, it is considered to be the Holy Land at that particular time, based upon those stories. But I'm telling you, the Holy Land is right here in North America, based upon jurisprudential, what we call reception. All right, we must understand. It was led by the first two Rashidun Khalifa who succeeded Muhammad, Abu Bakr and Umar ibn al-Khatib. Okay, so we see the conquest of the Levant was between Christians and Muslims. Okay, or Arabs and Berbers. Okay, because these ancient people from Levant were in fact Berbers. Okay. Because we know when the Arabs made their way of conquest and conquering in the name of discovery, where did they go next? They went to the Maghreb. Okay? They went to the Maghreb. The same Rashidun Caliphs. Let's look at it. Now let's go to the conquest of the Maghreb. Since this is the Muslim conquest of the Levant. And work our way up through the dates. Okay? Work our way up. We're in the 7th century now. Okay? Conquest of the Maghreb by the Rashidun and the Umayyad Caliphs commenced by 647 and concluded in 709 when the Byzantine Empire lost its last remaining stronghold to Khalifa al-Walid I. Northern Africa campaigns were part of the centuries of rapid early Muslim conquest. So it wasn't your land. Okay? It wasn't your land. Once you conquered the Maghreb, then you went on to the Iberian Peninsula, which led to the reconquistador of those ancient kings from Castile and Spain. Okay? Such as the Kingdom of Castile. Very important to understand that. Conquest of the Iberian Peninsula. This is true history. Anybody else going to tell you a story about the person who understands the story? Muslim conquest of Iberia. After you conquered Levant, you came to the Maghreb. Once you came to Maghreb and conquered that, then you came over to what we call the Peninsula. Okay? Now it said Odo the Great used Moors. Okay? But what Moors did Odo use? Because Moors denote to Arabs and Berbers. Okay? And we have to make the distinction between who we're talking about. Okay? Muslim conquest of Iberian Peninsula, known as the Arab conquest of Spain, was a Umayyad conquest of the Visigoth kingdom of Hispania in the early 8th century. The conquest resulted in the end of Christian rule in most of Iberia and established a Muslim Arab Moorish, you hear that? A Muslim Arab Moorish rule in the territory, which became known as Al-Andalus under the Umayyad dynasty during its Khalifa Al-Walid I, right there. Okay? Very, very, very important to understand that. Okay? These Visigoth kingdoms and kingdoms of Austria goes back to the rulers of the kings of Castile, Spain, Leon, etc., which were in fact Berber Spanish people. Spanish people, which were actually descent goes back to Berbers. Okay? Very important for you to understand that. All right? All right. Let's get here. So Visigoth's kingdoms and the kingdom of Austria. Let's go back to the Maghreb. Let's look at the belligerents in this particular conflict. The Byzantine Empire were warm with the Arabs, as they said, when they invaded the Levant, when they invaded the Maghreb, and when they invaded the Iberian Peninsula. The Byzantine Empire was the kingdom of Al-Atiba, which were what? Let's see. Berbers, Christian Berbers, the Kabyle Federation, Berbers, Kingdom of Currencies, put this up here. Kingdom of Currencies. Oh, come on. Romanian Berbers. You hear that? You see that? Berbers. Various other Berber tribes and stateless Visigoth kingdoms. So it's true and it's safe to say that the same people in Levant are the same people that are the same ancestors of the people in the Maghreb. The same people in the Maghreb are the same people in the Iberian Peninsula. Okay? Very important to understand Visigoth, Byzantine kingdom of tribes of Berbers before they were unified by Alfred the Great. Okay? We must understand. All right. Now we just back to Maghreb. Now we go back to the Iberian Peninsula. Right here. Same Visigoth king as well as the kingdom of Austria. Okay. Very, very important to understand that. From then, it went to the Umayyad invasion of Gaul. Okay. The Umayyad invasion of Gaul. Okay. Very important. It's called the Battle of Tours or the Battle of Poitiers. Okay. Braid into Aquitaine and Poitiers. Porto, that's how you pronounce it, okay? By Uthman ibn Nasir revolt. But before we even do that, let's deal with Berber and Islam. Go back there, because that's where I left off at. Berber and Islam. During the Umayyad conquest of the Iberia, once they conquered the Maghreb and Levant, Berbers formed their own military unit based on tribal allegiance with little contact with Arabs. You hear that? Uthman ibn Nasser, a Berber, not a Moor. Let's say a Berber commander stationed in Sardinia, Eastern Pyrenees, signed an alliance with who? Odo the Great, duked over Vasconia and Aquitaine, detached himself from central Cordoban rule and shortly established the rim, but was suppressed by Abdul Rahman al-Kafiki. Okay? So the Berber military ruler, Uthman ibn Nasser, which was in fact a Berber, he wasn't no more, and nor was he an Arab, because he went against the Umayyad successors or Rashidun successors, going all the way back to Muhammad and Abdul Rahman. Okay? It's right there. Okay? You can hit the little notes right here to get further research on it. All right? Who conquered Spain? The role of the Berbers in the conquest of the Iberian Peninsula. Who conquered Spain? You must do your homework. So we see that um, Odo the Great made alliances with what what they want to believe are Moors, but they're not. Right there, Odo the Great, he fought the Carolingian Franks and made alliance with Moors to combat them. All right, but here we see Odo the Great as well. Odo the Great, Duke of Vasconia and Aquitaine, detached himself with Central Cordoban rule and shortly established a rim, but was suppressed by Abdul Rahman al Ghafiqi. Okay, so we got a Berber helping out a French king called Odo the Great. All right, because reason why he did that is because once they conquered the Iberian Peninsula, they took their ass up into Gaul. Okay, let's look at it. Umayyad invasion in Gaul. As I come to my closing. Umayyad invasion of Gaul. Umayyad invasion of Gaul, part of the early Muslim conquest of the Reconquistor, taking back the Iberian Peninsula from the Arabs, from the Muslims, from the Moors, from the Umayyad dynasty. Okay? The Umayyad invasion of Gaul followed the Umayyad conquest of the Iberian Peninsula. You hear that? Once they took over the peninsula, they went over to Gaul. And Gaul was conquered, overseen by Odo the Great. Okay? And Odo the Great aligned himself not just with his own enemies, the Carolingians, all right? He armed himself with Berbers, okay? The Umayyad invasion occurred in two main phases, from AD 719 and then 732. Although the Umayyad secured control over Septimania, their incursions beyond this region into Loire and Rhone Valley fell. In 759, Muslim forces lost, hear that? Muslim forces lost Septimania to the Christian Frankish Empire and retreated to the Iberian Peninsula, which they called Al-Andalus. All right, how did that happen? Let's see. 719 Umayyad invasion of Gaul was the continuation of the conquest of the Visigoth kingdom of Hispania. So before it became Al-Andalus, it was called the Hispania. Okay? He said Septimania in southern Gaul was the last unconquered province of the Visigoth kingdoms. Muslim armies began to campaign in Septimania in 719 after the fall, and in 720 Narbonne and the capital of Visigoth rump state Umayyad armies composed of Arabs and Berbers turned north against Aquitaine. It was not till who? Uthman ibn Nasser revolt against the Umayyad dynasty and his sister Odo the Great. Why? How we know it? Let's see. Let's see. Look at the belligerents. The Umayyad Caliph for the Emirate of Cordoba and kingdoms of Franks, the Duchess of Aquitaine, the Duchess of Gascony, the Kingdom of Lombards. Odo the Great, Charles Martel, his enemy, Pepin the Short, his enemy, as well as this other person. But for the sake of conflict of foreigners invading the land, they got down together. Okay? Very, 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 very important to understand. And then who they got down with? They got down with the gentleman that they call, what's his name? Let's go back where it was. Scroll down as I come to my closing. Raids in Aquitaine, okay? By 725, all of Septimania was under the Umayyad rule, okay? Under the Umayyad rule. Uthman ibn Nasser, the Pyrenees Berber, ruler of the Eastern Pyrenees, detached himself from Cordoba and established a principality based on Berber power based in 731, okay? Very, very, very important to understand who this guy is. So let's check him out. Who is this Uthman Ibn Nasi? He was known as Munza. Uthman ibn Nasser, better known as Munza, was a Berber, not Arab, not Moor, not Moorish, all right, not a Muslim, was a Berber governor who established an independent power based in Sardinia on the eastern Pyrenees in modern-day southern France around 731 CE, breaking away from the Umayyad Khalifa because we know they were conquered by the Umayyad Khalifa when they stormed the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, when they stormed the Maghreb, because everybody on those continents were in fact Berbers. To solidify his position, he formed an alliance with who? Duke of Aquitaine, Odo the Great. Not a Moor, not a Muslim, not an Arab. He formed an alliance with Duke of Aquitaine. Why? Because they were Berbers. They were Berbers, brothers and sisters. He was eventually defeated by Umayyad forces Abdul al-Rahman ibn Abdul Allah al-Ghalfigi. Munusa's defeat was followed by the Umayyad forces turning their attention to Odo, which led to the Umayyad victory at the Battle of the River Organon. Okay? Munza is depicted in different contradictory chronicles during the Muslim conquest of the Iberian Peninsula. Okay? So with that being said, it was left up to the descendants who came down to preserve and protect our state, whether it was on here in North America, whether it was on the Iberian Peninsula, whether it was on the Maghreb, whether it was in what we call England or Britain, which was the overseas possession. Nonetheless, we are obligated to protect our estate no matter where we are. Because we know the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica says that the government that we were trying to maintain was the government of Berbers, known as Witten Mont. Okay? Witten Mont. Let me just prove it. All right. Let me make sure I covered everything. So let's go back once again. The Duchess of Aquitaine, Dukes of Aquitaine. All right. The Dukes of Aquitaine. All right. Plantagenet rulers of Aquitaine. Right. Going all the way back to the invasion of the Arabs in Gaul, as well as the Iberian Peninsula, as well as on the Maghreb, all right, as well as Levant. The Plantagenet rulers stepped up during the Crusade Wars, okay? All of the wars known as Crusade Wars, we stepped up, okay? We stepped up, and this what triggered what we call the 100-Year War, okay? The 100-Year War. From Henry II all the way up to Edward III, okay? Triggered the 100-Year War, which is the reason why we're in the condition we're in now, okay? Henry II, Richard I, Henry II, right there. All these are Eleanor of Aquitaine. See the link? Going all the way back to Odo, so they must have been Berbers. Henry II was the son of Godfrey. Right there, Plantagenet and Angevin crown. Godfrey was the son of Fulk V, ruler of Jerusalem. He was from the house of Anglaire. Okay? He's from the house of Anglaire. Fulk V, king of Jerusalem. Right here. Okay? King of Jerusalem. So if you claim to descend down from all these families that were made up of many houses, but made up one house by way of marriage, okay? All right? And protected the bloodline through paternal, not maternal, but paternal, patrilineal descent, we call it agnatic succession, okay? And if you are of agnatic succession, whether you are of Spain, French, Frankish, all right, or whatever it is, now the standard is falling under the protection of what we call the Angevin Empire, because these were the protectors of the Duchesses of Aquitaine. Okay, and these were the kings of England. Okay, these were the kings of England, and I go to the kingdom of England and I close out. Kingdom of England. We discussed all this in the past 4 or 5 days. Through the past 4 or 5 lessons that I did, we discussed everything in detail. Beginning with the year Alfred the Great, which was not a barbarian, which was not a Viking, but yet he was born with Vikings. And we know he was the founder of the kingdom of Wessex, which founded the English Empire, which we know, according to the map, it's in the continent of what we call North America, before they gave him these modern names. Okay? It says that Alfred the Great reoccupied London from what? The Danish Viking. We know the Danes informed the North about the landmass here of North America, known as Newfoundland, which we see in the new map of the new map of the English Empire in North America. All right, we know that they warred with the Anglo-Saxons, do what we call the Heptarchy, and what they call them the against the Great Heathen Army, which were foreigners. We continue to fight them until this present day. All right. So, in order to have the protection of our ancestors, we must remember our ancestors who paved the way for us. Okay. All right. We must remember, and the last one who was left with the the tenure, the office, was the Plantagenet crown. All right, or the Angevin crown. History of the Kingdom of England from the Norman Conquest to 1066. We know 1066 is when the English kings comes in. From 1065, there was nothing but Berber kings. Okay? So it says history of the Kingdom of Berbers, known as England, from the Norman Conquest to 1066, conventionally distinguished periods named after the successive ruling dynasties. The Normans, the Angevins, the Plantagenets, and then all these other dynasties come latelys are irrelevant. Okay? They are, in fact, irrelevant. So understand, brothers and sisters, I know the history, and the history is here with me to preserve. And if you're a part of it, then you must understand it in lieu of the preservation of you. Okay, and with that, I'm going to greet you as always as I meet you in the love of our ancestors. Peace.